My name is Omar Zubair, and uh, I grew up in. I was born just a little bit outside of town, and I grew up here in Montgomery. Um, I am trained as a philosopher, and my profession is predominantly as a composer. Um, yeah, so this presentation, this talk, will just sort of uh, basically chronologically, but in a sort of nonlinear way, walk through some of my life events that led to me getting to the point in my life in which I became an artist and what that means exactly. Um, you know, uh, I actually have never had an exhibit here in my hometown of Montgomery, and yet, right now, at this very moment, I'm currently working on projects in Paris, Japan, New York, Vancouver, and Los Angeles, um, which is all kind of a way to say, you know, if you feel like you are misunderstood by those around you, there are definitely people out there that will get you, and maybe a lot of people. Um, but you have to go and seek them out. I think a lot of people fall into the trap of making work and then just hoping that the right people will discover them. And, you know, my career has really been forged by finding finding the people, by thinking who is it that I would like to make work for, that I am making work for, and then going to those people directly and presenting the work to them, performing for them. And sometimes they they might not even perceive it as a performance or as an artistic presentation. And I think often that can work in my favor. I'm reminded of a common situation in which you might be driving down the street and see someone who's sort of dancing while they're waiting for the bus, or maybe juggling in the park, and it leaves a real strong impression. It can make your day better. It can make you feel like you live in a better world. And yet, you go into an art museum or into a theater, and it takes a lot more mm, to elicit that same wonder and magic. Um, yeah, so just a little tip for anyone out there. Uh, if what you're doing just feels like life, people will treat it with much generosity. Um, so I was raised here in Montgomery, and at the age of about 6, um, I was nominated or elected or to be a part of the first elementary school class at Forest Avenue Magnet Program. Um, the I remember the principal coming to interview me, a 6-year-old, and asked me, oh, if I read or what I've been reading. And me and my mom had been reading The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit while I was going to bed. And so I sort of talked about that lucidly enough that I was accepted into the program. Um, as simple as an event as that is, that was a sort of a critical juncture in my becoming an artist, in that it was the very first time in my life that I had direct affirmation that something I had imagined, a space I had gone to in my mind, that because I had had that experience, I was able to transform my waking life, consensus reality. Um, and ever since then, I've known for a fact that the boundary between the imaginal and the real, is porous. Um, I don't know if any of you know this or remember, but back in the late 80s, when I was a second grader in the first class of Forest Avenue Elementary School, Magnet, we were actually learning 5 languages of Spanish, French, German, Greek, I think ancient Greek and Latin. Um, yes, kind of amazing that that was happening in Montgomery, Alabama in the 80s. Um, well, afterwards, I went to Baldwin, which is a brilliant program that mixes the arts and the sciences. And then I went to LAMP, where I graduated from. After LAMP, I moved to California, both to pursue a career as a rock and roller and to study philosophy. Um, the rock and roll happened. I joined a band when I was 19, and we played Coachella, we played the Warped Tour, we got a record deal, all the sort of rock and roll dreams came true. And at the same time, I was in grad school for philosophy, and I was starting to have all these, existential questions and queries and crises. um, I was sort of, I found that when I would communicate something verbally, like I'm doing now, that often so much was lost in the translation that from me to having a thought into representing it with a word and having someone have to unpack that representation into their own mind, that just most of the information was lost in the process. And so I was sort of desperately searching for a more direct way to communicate, as probably most people that go into the arts are. Um, and the first part of that, of me learning how to communicate more directly, was to spend some time being radically honest and sort of radically honestly looking at my thinking. Like, what is a thought? What is it like when I think? What am I thinking? Um, and one day on a train ride from Los Angeles to the desert, I had enough gumption and discipline to really try to do this experiment. And yeah, I'd like to read for you the results of me trying to look at what it is that I'm thinking in a really radical, honest way. What is a thought? Shatik, 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 shata, tick, tea, doom, tick, 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 doom, ta, tea, ki, dee, ah, do, e, crack, sa, oo, peak, tack, pum, some pum, pick, tack, shatik, back, so, oh, dum, sa, po, shatik, sa, po, roosh, rick, tack, potik, murrah, doom, ma, rack, tick, pack, sa, sum, pa, rum, pa, ransom, franta, pantrick, time, ku, rack, some, rose-colored racing enriched reverie resounds, deus doling indifference indolence induced boosted black rack attack Jackson past sap and act tonic tossed obsolescence inception all act taxonomous stake staring garish sarong-gated grazing engaging ovate teen neurotic collude bionic aloof and along the line that grows upward from the center of an unused palm Eyes trace the voyage of years on the move. Ears supplant calm with fatigue in their monotonously biased attraction to the sonic formation of motion. Shtick, shtick, shtick. These days either last forever through the lack of a reference point resonating from within the feedback loop, or deny time the distance needed to recognize its own movement from repetition, convinced that it is merely a memory of the initial cycle. Trains transfixed on the window and wondering whether it's fair to sit whilst in the act of transformation, for really travel these days is not so much a going from one place to another, but rather a detaching of oneself from the surroundings while they reassemble into a more desirable landscape. But really the scope of escape is incapable of being encapsulated, and the swish swish of the furious outside world, using the air as its fingers trying to pry this window open, comforts me with its impotence, and relaxation realigns the way that traveling eyes transfix. Trees, tree-like, resembling a tree, unseen roots and rattling hands, and rolling seems much more stable than standing still, and still I sit, and passing prepares me for letting go, and blue and field and diminishing returns demand the always new, and field new, and blue new, and tree, well, I was going to say new, but really I've already let go of the comparison, and flash and flash and flash and flash, tick and flash, tick and flash, sh, 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 tick, tick, tick. Yeah, it was much stranger than what I expected, and so I I realized if I was going to use radical honesty to try to dive into more direct communication, that I was going to become a citizen of the strange and the weird. And um, soon after that, after I uh, graduated from grad school, I left Los Angeles and moved to New York. And when I went searching for others who were engaged in this process of radical honesty, where I found them was in the arts. um, as you could tell from that writing, I started to think about onomatopoeia, and I wanted to. Initially, I started to try to create a new language, a new direct communication language that was based on onomatopoeia. I thought maybe there would be less information lost in the transfer. And the deeper I went into trying to create a language out of onomatopoeia, the more I realized that such language already existed, and that it was perhaps the oldest language, music. Um, so when I moved to New York, uh, I looked around and applied for jobs as a composer. I thought that was a way for me to continue to philosophize, but in a more direct way through sound. Um, Within a few months, I was given a job as a composer for a theater company, a pretty major theater company that had been around for, you know, 20 something plus years, called the Wooster Group. Um, and I was lucky to get in with them. There were multiple MacArthur Fellows that were a part of the group, um, and they were willing for me and interested in me to be radically honest. Um, it's hard for me to show much work from that time period. I mean, I'm still a part of the group. It's been 14 years now. Um, because the work that we do is uh, theater. But I will show you. I'll show you a little bit of video work from around this time. Um, This piece I made with an artist from California. It does have sound as well, but um, in California is pretty gritty, and so the sound can be pretty wild on the projects I work on over there. I'll give you just a little taste. uh, there's this Tibetan practice, this Tibetan Buddhist monastery practice where the all the monks in a monastery, say 40 of them, 100 of them will all get together and sing this song to this entity that lives outside of the wheel of time that is sort of uh, in control of life and death, and as such, is sort of has one foot in life and one foot in death. And listening to this right now, this is kind of a little bit of what the songs they sing to this entity sound like. This piece was sort of exploring the idea that, or the process of what do machines see? What does a computer see when it sees the world? Um, um, yeah, I'll let that keep going. Um, but something that you might be noticing in this presentation is uh, this process of feedback. So there's a video at the bottom, and that's feeding into this video in the middle, and that's feeding into this video at the top, and um, that has become a pretty important part of my practice, um, especially as a composer. I'm not too interested in writing music down. That was useful in a certain period of time, but I don't think that was ever ideal for any composer. And in this moment in which recording devices are so prevalent and available, recording has become my main tool for composition. And the more I work with recordings and recording ideas and then distilling them into compositions, the more evident it is that recordings are a form of uh, temporal manipulation, or temporomancy, perhaps, where we take a moment of time and then bring that moment of time into another moment of time, and I can spend 100 hours sort of polishing this 30-second or 30-minute moment of time, finding its essential elements. And that has really affected the way that I think about time. And, um, at this point, it's really hard for me to accept that time moves just linearly in units of equal measure, that one moment is the same amount of time as the next moment ad infinitum. That with the advent of recordings, it becomes much more evident that time is and can be cyclical. It could be fun just thinking about cyclical time. I'm going to pull up the video of this live stream happening, and it should be about measure. 20 seconds behind is the same amount of time as the next moment. How I am currently recording this, and so let's just see what happens temporally. With the advent of recordings, it becomes much more evident that time is and can be cyclical. Oh yeah, good point, man. It could be fun just thinking about cyclical time. This is a tool. You can't see this right now. I'm going to pull up the video of this live stream. There is a musical tool that I take with me. It should be about 20 seconds behind. It's the same amount of time as the next moment. How I am currently Alabama, and so River King. Let's just see what happens. And the advent of recordings, it becomes much more evident. It's kind of my talisman of is and can home of Alabama. Oh yeah, good point. Play it into the. I'm gonna play it now. No, in the present. This is a tool. You can't in the past, pulled up in the video feed. It'll come back in about 20 seconds or so. There is a musical tool. Maybe I'll play with it again, and we'll see. It should be about 20 seconds behind. The same amount of time as the next moment. Alabama, River King. Let's just see what happens to the advent of recordings. It becomes much more evident. It's kind of my talisman. Home of Alabama. Oh yeah, good point. Play it into the. I'm gonna play it now. No, in the present. This is a tool. In the past, in the video feed, it'll come back in about 20 seconds or so. There is a musical tool. Maybe I'll play with it again, and we'll see. It should be about 20 seconds behind. The same amount of time as the next moment. Alabama, River King. Let's just see what happens to the advent of recordings. It becomes much more evident. It's kind of my talisman. Home of Alabama. Oh yeah, good point. Play it into the. I'm gonna play it now. No, in the present. This is a tool. In the past, in the video feed, it'll come back in about 20 seconds or so. There is a musical tool. Maybe I'll play with it again, and we'll see. It should be about. Okay, well, enough of those shenanigans, but I think that the feedback that was happening there, the looping, that is always happening when I'm thinking with when I'm going over a memory. That's a temporal looping situation, and yeah, it's an essential tool. It's an essential tool of the composer and the artist, and connects to me studying philosophy. And it's I've looked at the time, and I see that we're getting on a little bit. Maybe I should take a few questions. Anybody have any questions? Start off with the hope that I can tell you something about my practice in 25 minutes, and 25 minutes comes, and it seems that we're still saying hello. I think that's fair. I think that's honest. Maybe I'll play just a little bit more sound while we see if anybody has a question. Somewhere in the notes of this or something, there will be a link to some of the music that I make, which is my main practice. Probably a few hours of it, and yeah, have a gander sometime if you're interested. Okay. Here's a question. can I say something about the current projects that I'm working on? Um, okay, well, I'm working on one project that is being funded by the nation of Canada because they have, uh, in the last many years, they've actually doubled their arts funding. And I'm working with a Canadian artist um, who has been recording herself while she sleeps, and she began to notice that she talks in her sleep. I mean, she sort of has been told that she talks in her sleep, but hearing herself talk in her sleep has really awoken her to that process. And oddly enough, she's begun to hear other voices in her dream recordings. Um, and so we are working on a performance that is that's sort of trying to see if we can conjure, evoke, if we can bring her this other voice. It's almost a young girl's voice that comes out of her when she dreams to meet her in her current state. You know, it sort of fits in with this idea we've been talking about temporal loops. And because of the current pandemic, and it's hard to do theater works, we've been workshopping a new process, a new theatrical process by which the stage will be your telephone. And so you will get these text messages for about a 3-week period that will bring you into this whole world. So that's a long-term process. We've been working on it for a number of years, but this we're about to go back into a deep research period. I'm also working on a piece. I'm working on a video piece in Paris for this new art museum that's opening with this Afghani artist, this woman who actually had to leave Afghanistan, and she was studying in Pakistan. She had to leave that region because her work was a little too controversial, dealing with sexual politics, and she moved to Paris. And so now we're working on a film piece dealing with her experiences, having sort of one foot in that part of the world and one foot more in the Western world. And my own heritage, my paternal lineage is from Pakistan and Afghanistan and India, and my maternal lineage is from the States and from Ireland and Scotland. And so I too have that in me, this sort of conversation between the East and the West. And so that's actually been really wonderful excuse to start to learn more about the music of that region and use those tones to build a sound score that is of both places. I also, during the pandemic, I've been teaching a weekly improvisational dance course with a choreographer who's based in New York. And that has actually been a really meaningful practice. Every week, a group of dancers, or actually there's a lot of other kind of artists, a lot of painters show up, and poets and sculptors who are just looking to learn about their bodies and become embodied and become motivated and inspired to make their own work, show up to this improvisational dance class. And it's over Zoom, and I'm watching everybody move, and in real time I'm creating improvisational music to continue the movements that people are doing, but also to challenge them and to connect everybody. Something that has been really evident doing those improvisational dance classes this past year is that we feel as if we cannot touch each other over Zoom or through a screen. The sound that is coming out of the speakers is literally touching you. It's touching all of us who hear the sound. And so in a dance class, I sort of am playing the role of the tactile tether to all of the participants. And yeah, that's been a beautiful practice. It looks like we're past the 30-minute mark of this presentation, and so I will bid you adieu, but it's been lovely spending some time with you, and I hope to get to spend some more with you at some point.